Imagine you are sitting outside on a clear afternoon. You look up at the bright blue sky and suddenly you see it. A small gray blob drifts across your vision. You try to look directly at it, but it quickly ducks away. It is like a tiny ghost or a little worm swimming just out of reach. These are what we call eye floaters. For most people, they look like cobwebs, dark spots, or even thin, tangled strings. If you've ever tried to swat away a bug that wasn't actually there, you know how this feels. It can be distracting and even frustrating. You blink your eyes, you rub them, but the shapes remain. They are just floating there, moving through your line of sight as if they have a mind of their own. They are often more visible in the morning light. The interesting thing about these floaters is how they behave. They don't stay in one place. If you move your eyes to the left, the floaters follow a split second later, drifting as if they are caught in an underwater current. When you stop moving your eyes, they continue to glide for a moment before slowly settling down. Most people notice them the most when they are looking at something very bright. Maybe you're staring at a white computer screen, or perhaps you're looking at a fresh blanket of snow. In these moments, the floaters become almost impossible to ignore. It feels like your eyes are dirty, but no amount of cleaning will help because the issue isn't on the surface. It is happening inside your eye. To understand why this happens, we have to look at the anatomy of the eye. Between the lens at the front and the retina at the back, there's a large space. This space is filled with a clear, gel-like substance called the vitreous body. When you are young, this gel is thick and firm, with a consistency similar to egg whites. It helps the eye maintain its shape and provides a clear pathway for light. In a healthy eye, this gel is perfectly transparent. This creates a stable environment for the retina to function. However, as the years go by, the chemistry of this gel begins to change, and that is where the trouble starts for the patient. What is truly fascinating is that you aren't actually seeing the objects themselves. Instead, you are seeing the shadows they cast. Think about a shadow play on a wall. If you put an object in front of a light, it casts a shadow on the screen behind it. Your eye works the same way. The retina is like a screen at the back of your eye that catches light and sends images to your brain. If any solid particle gets caught in the vitreous gel, it blocks the light and casts a shadow onto the retina. That shadow is the floater you see. This is also why floaters look different depending on their location. If a floater is close to the retina, its shadow is sharp and dark. If it is further away, the shadow is blurry, looking more like a faint cloud. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. As we get older, a process called syneresis begins. This is when the vitreous gel starts to break down. It loses its solid structure and separates into liquid water and solid clumps. This can happen slowly over several years. Imagine a container of gelatin that starts to get watery and lumpy. Inside the eye, the microscopic collagen fibers that give the gel its shape start to fail. These tiny fibers are normally invisible, but during syneresis, they start to tangle and clump together. They denature and form visible strings and knots. These clumps are the physical cause of the floaters. They are bits of your eye's structure that have come loose and are now drifting in the pockets of liquid within the vitreous. It is a natural change, but it marks a shift in your visual health. As these liquid pockets continue to grow, the structure of the eye undergoes a more significant shift. The vitreous gel does not just sit there, it begins to shrink. Think of it like a grape slowly turning into a raisin. As it loses its volume, it can no longer fill the entire space inside the eye. This shrinking is the next stage after syneresis. It creates a physical tension because the vitreous is actually attached to the surface of the retina in several places. The retina is the delicate, light-sensitive layer at the back of your eye. When the shrinking gel pulls on the retina, it creates a mechanical sensation that the brain interprets in a very specific way. The patient might suddenly start seeing bright flashes of light, especially when moving their eyes quickly in a dark room. These are called photopsias. They are the result of the vitreous tugging on the retina. Since the retina does not have pain receptors, when it is touched or pulled, it responds by sending a signal to the brain that looks like a spark, a lightning bolt, or a camera flash. These flashes can be quite startling, but they are a direct result of the mechanics happening inside the eye. This pulling and tugging is a sign that the vitreous is trying to separate itself from the back of the eye. This process is known as posterior vitreous detachment, or PVD. Though it sounds serious, the ophthalmologist will tell you that it is a common part of getting older. Most people will experience it if they live long enough. It usually happens in later life, though it can occur earlier if someone is very nearsighted. For most people, PVD is a benign event. The gel pulls away, the attachment points let go, and the vitreous settles into a new, smaller shape. Once the gel has fully detached from the retina, the flashes of light usually stop because there is no longer anything pulling on those sensitive nerve cells. It is like a piece of tape being slowly peeled off a wall. Once the tape is off, the tension is gone. During this transition, the patient might notice a sudden increase in the number or size of floaters. This happens because when the vitreous detaches, it often pulls away a small piece of the protein ring that was surrounding the optic nerve. This creates a large, circular or hook-shaped floater called a Weiss ring. It can be very annoying at first because it is bigger than the previous strings and blobs. However, even this new large floater tends to settle down over time. It eventually drifts lower in the eye, moving away from the center of vision where it is less noticeable. It stays in the eye, but it is no longer directly in front of the lens. One of the most amazing things about the human body is its ability to adapt to these changes. This is called neural adaptation. Your brain is a master at filtering out information it deems useless or repetitive. The brain does the same thing with eye floaters. Even though the shadows are still being cast onto the retina, the brain eventually learns to ignore them. It stops processing those specific patterns of dark spots. This does not happen overnight. It can take weeks or even months of seeing the same shapes before the brain decides to delete them from the conscious image. This is why many people who were once very bothered by their floaters eventually find that they do not see them anymore, even though the floaters are still physically there inside the eye. The shadows are still falling on the retina, but the brain has simply stopped reporting them to your awareness. It is a natural way to maintain clear vision despite these internal changes. The vitreous might be thinner and full of liquid pockets, but the visual system finds a clever way to work around these obstacles. As the fluid pockets inside the eye continue to collapse and the vitreous fully separates, the eye reaches a new state of stability. The physical changes are mostly complete. The patient might still have moments where a floater drifts across a bright white screen, but for the most part, the visual field remains clear and functional. This stage of the process is about the eye finding its new normal after the structural breakdown of the gel. It is a period of adjustment where the brain and the eye learn to work together again, allowing the patient to focus on the world outside instead of the shadows moving inside. While most cases of vitreous detachment are harmless, the ophthalmologist warns that there is a thin line between aging and an emergency. The process of the gel pulling away is usually clean. However, in some eyes, the connection between the vitreous and the retina is very strong. Instead of letting go gently, the shrinking gel can grab onto the tissue and pull with enough force to cause a rip. This is a retinal tear. When this happens, the liquid formed during syneresis finds an opening. It begins to leak through the hole and travel behind the retina. As this fluid builds up, it lifts the retina away from the back of the eye, much like wallpaper peeling off a damp wall. This is a retinal detachment, and it is a major threat to vision. Unlike neural adaptation where the brain ignores shadows, a detachment is a physical separation that cuts off blood supply to cells. The patient might notice warning signs. While a few strings are normal, a sudden explosion of tiny dark spots is not. These spots look like a shower of pepper. They are often tiny drops of blood or pigment cells released because of the tear. Another red flag is the sensation of a shade or a curtain falling over your vision. This is not a floating shadow that moves with your eye. Instead, it is a dark, solid area that stays in one place, usually starting from the side and moving toward the center. This happens as the retina loses its connection to the back of the eye. If this occurs, the time for waiting is over. An ophthalmologist must act quickly to seal the tear or reattach the retina before the damage becomes permanent and vision is lost forever. Certain people are at a higher risk for these complications. Those with high myopia or severe nearsightedness are especially vulnerable. Because their eyeballs are physically longer, the layers of the eye are stretched thinner. A thin retina is much easier to tear. The internal structure is under more tension, making the process of vitreous shrinkage more dangerous. Additionally, anyone who has suffered a head or eye injury in the past should be cautious. A hard blow can cause the vitreous to shift violently, leading to immediate tears. Medical history also plays a role. People who have had cataract surgery might experience changes in how the vitreous sits. Systemic issues like diabetes also affect the internal environment. In diabetic patients, fragile blood vessels can grow on the retina. If these break, they leak blood into the vitreous, creating a sudden appearance of thick, dark floaters. Inflammation inside the eye can also speed up the breakdown of the gel, leading to more debris and a higher risk of structural failure. Monitoring eye health is a lifelong process. The patient learns to recognize the difference between familiar cobwebs and something new. It is about paying attention to the frequency of flashes and the density of shadows. Even though the brain filters out the mundane, it is designed to alert us to sudden changes. Regular checkups ensure that the eye's transition through aging remains a natural process rather than a crisis. In the end, most find that floaters are just a nuisance. As the vitreous stabilizes and the brain finishes its work of neural adaptation, the world looks clear again. The shadows might still be there, drifting in the liquid space, but they no longer take center stage. By understanding the eye and knowing the warning signs, the patient can move forward with confidence. The eye is a resilient organ that protects its most important job, letting us see the world.